In the last video, we talked about functions and using them in R. In this video, we'll talk about more complicated functions that take multiple inputs. We'll also talk about the special case where arguments have default values. We'll primarily be using the mean function here. We've used it in the past, but it has extra arguments that can be useful. To find out anything about how to use functions in R, you can type the question mark followed by the name of the function. So here we type question mark mean. This is the help page to the mean function. There's a lot of information here that you might not understand right now, but that's okay. The description tells you the main purpose of the function. The usage tells you all the different arguments to the function and all the default values if there are any. Here mean has 3 arguments, x, trim, na.rm, and we won't talk about the ... here at the introductory level. We'll focus on x and trim alone for this video. The arguments section tells you what types of variable the different arguments should be. These types could be a numerical vector, logical value, or even a data frame. These could be any of the R objects we talked about in the previous videos. Here, for the mean function, x should be a numerical vector that we want the mean of. Notice that x does not have a default, so we have to provide a numerical vector or else we'll get an error. Trim stands for the fraction of data we want to omit before calculating the mean. This is useful when we think there's outliers in the data. For example, if we set the trim to be 10% for the 30 days of June temperature, we'll omit the lowest 3 and highest 3 days of temperature before calculating the mean. The other arguments have default values already, so we don't have to worry about them. R is written so that the default values are usually quite sensible, and so you can focus on only the arguments you change. If you are unsure about what the arguments do, it is usually alright to just leave them alone. Before moving on, let's take a look at June temp so we know what trim will do when calculating the mean. Again, June temp is the 30 days of temperature in June sorted by date. If we sort the values using the sort function, we'll range the temperatures from lowest to highest and not by date. If we set trim to be 10% when calculating the mean, we will omit the 3 lowest values, 61 and the 262s, and the 3 highest values, 82, 84, 86, when calculating the mean. The mean will be calculated using only the middle 24 values, and this is useful because sometimes our data might have outliers and the mean is sensitive to outliers. At the top here is an example call of the mean function with a trim argument. If I type this into R will fill in the arguments in the same order as in the help page. Again, recall that the first argument is x, the vector of numbers we want the mean of. Since we want to calculate the mean of the June temperatures, I would type June temp here. The second argument, trim, again is the fraction of numbers we want to omit before calculating the mean. If I set this to be 0.1, I will omit the top and bottom 10% values before calculating the mean. Again, so if I type this entire command into R, I will use the middle 24 temperatures to calculate the mean. Since R enters the argument in order, we can omit the trim equals part in the previous command. Since we're not specifying which argument the 0.1 is corresponding to, R will use the order on the help page. Again, since the second argument for mean was trim, it will assume that the 0.1 is corresponding to trim. If I type this command into R, I will calculate the mean using the middle 24 temperatures. What if we change the order of the arguments? In the command, R doesn't know that we changed the order of the arguments, so we'll keep treating the first argument as x and second argument as trim. R will put the 0.1 as the x value and put all the June temp values into trim. This will give us an error because it is expecting trim to be only one number instead of a vector of numbers. Let's try these commands out in R. Again, the first command we typed in was mean of June temp while trim equals to 0.1. This gives us the mean of the middle 24 temperatures. The second argument we typed in was omitting the trim equals part, which gives us the same value. If we rearrange the arguments, we'll get an error because trim should be only one number instead of a vector of numbers. If you really want to rearrange the arguments, you can always specify to let R know which argument is which, and that will give you the correct answer.